Michael Shane Bargo Jr. Michael Shane Bargo Jr. was just 18 when he orchestrated one of Florida's most disturbing murders, the calculated execution of 15-year-old Seth Jackson in Summerfield on April 17, 2011. What began as teenage jealousy over a girl spiraled into a nightmarish plot that shocked the nation. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated cruelty. Fueled by rage over Seth's past relationship with his girlfriend, Amber Wright, Bargo devised a plan to lure his rival into a death trap. Wright played her role by sending Seth flirtatious text messages, promising reconciliation. Believing he was reuniting with her, Seth walked straight into another accomplice's home, unaware he was stepping into his own execution chamber. As Seth sat in the living room, he was blindsided, attacked with a wooden object, beaten and dazed. Before he could comprehend what was happening, Bargo pulled out a revolver and opened fire. Seth staggered outside, desperate to escape, but was caught in the front yard, beaten again and shot once more. But the true horror was still to come. Dragged back inside, Seth was shoved into a bathtub where Bargo continued his assault, beating him, cursing him and firing round after round.
A 15-year-old child knew he was being dragged back into a house and was going to die.
Bargo's chilling intent, by his own admission, was to keep Seth alive just long enough so he would know who was ending his life. His final act was 2 gunshots to Seth's face. The group then moved with disturbing efficiency to erase the evidence. They stuffed Seth's body into a sleeping bag, burned it in a fire pit, and scrubbed the house clean with bleach. The next day, they shoveled the charred remains into paint buckets and dumped them in a water-filled quarry. Far from remorseful, Bargo bragged about the murder to his girlfriend, her family, neighbors, and even fellow inmates. When justice caught up, Bargo became the youngest person on Florida's death row. In August 2013, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder and recommended the death penalty in a 10-2 vote. Judge David Eddy imposed the sentence that December, sealing Bargo's fate.
We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Michael Shane Bargo Jr., should be sentenced to death, yes.
But his case wasn't over. In 2016, sweeping changes to Florida's death penalty laws, after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that jury recommendations had to be unanimous, gave Bargo a second chance. Because his original recommendation wasn't unanimous, his death sentence was vacated in 2017, and a new penalty phase was ordered. 2 years later, in April 2019, a new jury listened to the evidence. This time they were unanimous. Michael Bargo deserved the ultimate punishment. On September 12, 2019, Judge Anthony Toddy imposed the death penalty once again, declaring that the brutality of the crime left no room for mercy. While Bargo pleaded desperately for his life, the next teenager's response to his verdict was anything but remorseful. He lashed out in open defiance. Dexter Johnson. Dexter Johnson was just 18 years old in 2006 when Houston prosecutors said he embarked on one of the city's most chilling crime sprees. Over the course of 25 days, Johnson and his crew tore through the city, leaving behind a trail of robberies, terror, and at least 3 murders. The darkest moment came on June 18, 2006. That night, Johnson and 4 accomplices, Keith Ron Fields, Ashley Irvin, Lewis Irvin, and Timothy Randall, targeted 23-year-old Maria Aparice and 17-year-old Hui No in a carjacking. What began as a robbery spiraled into a nightmare. The couple was threatened at gunpoint, forced into their own car, and driven around Houston as the group demanded money and ATM codes. The horror escalated when Johnson led them to a wooded area. There, he raped Aparice as No was forced to listen, mocked and humiliated by the others. Moments later, Johnson and another teen executed both victims with gunshots to the head, abandoning their bodies in the woods. It wasn't until Randall broke and confessed that police uncovered the couple's remains 5 days later. By June 2007, Johnson stood trial in Harris County's 208th District Court. The jury found him guilty of capital murder in the deaths of Aparice and No.
Dexter Darnell Johnson, the jury has found you guilty of capital murder. In accordance with the laws of the state of Texas, this court hereby assesses your punishment of death. Ladies and gentlemen.
But the drama didn't end with the verdict. When the judge handed down the death sentence, Johnson first sat motionless, then exploded, flinging a chair across the courtroom as chaos erupted. The anguish rippled through the families. Two of Johnson's relatives collapsed in the hallway and had to be carried out on stretchers. The mother of his toddler daughter fell to the floor, wailing in despair. The courtroom scene was as tragic and volatile as the crimes that brought them there. Moving on, the next teen's mother placed the blame not on him, but on the absence of positive role models in his life.
He had no role model. I had no clue how to nurture the African American culture in him.
Christopher Andre Villalva. Christopher Villalva's story is one of brutal violence, tragedy, and ultimately, a fight for justice that spanned 2 decades. In 1999, at just 19 years old, Villalva was convicted of orchestrating the carjacking and murders of Todd and Stacy Bagley, a young couple from Iowa who had come to Fort Hood, Texas as youth ministers. On June 21, 1999, Villalva and his crew, the 212 Piru Bloods, hatched a plan to rob unsuspecting victims by pretending to need a ride. Alongside Brandon Bernard and 3 teenage accomplices, Tony Sparks, Christopher Lewis, and Terry Brown, Villalva targeted the Bagleys outside a convenience store in Killeen. When the couple offered their help, the trap was sprung. Villalva and Sparks pulled handguns and forced Todd to drive into a remote area of the Fort Hood military reservation. The group stripped the Bagleys of their valuables, wallets, jewelry, bank cards, even the PIN to their account, before locking them in the trunk of their own car. What followed was hours of torment. Villalva spent the afternoon driving around, withdrawing money and trying to pawn Stacy's wedding ring. All the while, Todd and Stacy prayed and sang "Jesus Loves Me" from the trunk, pleading for their lives. Their faith was steadfast even in the face of looming death. Eventually, Villalva drove to Belton Lake Recreation Area. There he ordered the car doused in lighter fluid. He opened the trunk one last time, cursed at Stacy and shot Todd in the head, killing him instantly. He then shot Stacy in the face, knocking her unconscious. Brandon Bernard lit the fire that would engulf the car. Stacy, still alive, died from smoke inhalation. The trial came swiftly. In 2000, Villalva and Bernard were tried together in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas. A jury, made up of 11 white jurors and 1 black juror, found both men guilty of carjacking resulting in death and first-degree murder on federal land. They were unanimously sentenced to death.
He had no role model. I had no clue how to nurture the African American culture in him.
Over the years, Villalva's mother, Lisa Brown, fought relentlessly to save her son's life.
When he was 10 days old, he was diagnosed with meningitis. So he sustained organic brain damage, severe depression, because he was dealing with a lot of issues, racial issues with being a biracial child.
But on September 24, 2020, after 21 years on death row, Villalva was executed by lethal injection at 6:46 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. He became the 7th federal inmate executed since executions resumed after a 17-year pause, and the first African American among them. His mother was present, later telling the Associated Press that her son locked eyes with her in his final moments. For the Bagley family, the execution was bittersweet. Todd's mother, Georgia, said she welcomed it, remarking, "I believe when someone deliberately takes the life of another, they suffer the consequences for their actions." The case of Christopher Villalva remains one of the most haunting reminders of how one choice, one act of violence, can devastate families on both sides, and ripple across generations. Moving forward, another young defendant broke down, begging for his life as the weight of sentencing bore down on him.
I think there's a lot of good things I can do with my life if you allow me to keep my life.
Austin Gregory Myers. On January 28, 2014, 18-year-old Justin Back was brutally murdered by Austin Gregory Myers, a childhood friend, and Timothy E. Mosley. Both just 19, the pair plotted to steal a safe they believed was full of riches. The devastating twist? That safe held only $70. Their preparation was chilling. Over 2 days they bought gloves, ammonia, septic enzymes, and even wire to fashion a homemade garrote. Myers, the mastermind, refused Mosley's idea of simply robbing the house when Justin wasn't home, insisting Justin had to die so there would be no witnesses. That night, under the guise of hanging out, they lured Justin into a trap. When he went to grab drinks, Mosley slipped the garrote around him, but it snagged on his chin. A struggle followed. Myers pinned Justin down while Mosley pulled a knife. Justin cried out desperately, "Help me, Austin!" But Myers coldly replied, "It will all be over soon."
No mess. What's the significance of that? What did that mean?
The idea of strangling them, that way it would create no mess, pretty much be an easier job to handle. Justin was trying to ask us why, he was pleading to stop, and pretty much begging for his life.
Moments later, Justin bled to death from multiple stab wounds. The aftermath was as calculated as the murder. The killers looted the house, taking the safe, a handgun, credit cards, and jewelry, then tried scrubbing away evidence with ammonia. They wrapped Justin's body in a blanket, dumped it in a remote wooded area, and even shot it twice before pouring septic enzymes over it to speed decomposition. Justice, however, came swiftly. On October 16, 2014, Myers was sentenced to death, becoming Ohio's youngest death row inmate at just 19.
The court finds that the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the aggravating circumstance outweighs the mitigating factor. Therefore, the sentence of death shall be imposed upon Austin Gregory Myers on the charge of aggravated murder.
His desperate plea for mercy was met with an unflinching judgment.
I think there's a lot of good things I can do with my life if you allow me to keep my life.
For Justin's family, the sentence brought a mix of grief, anger, and a hollow sense of closure.
Justin went out in a very bad way, and so we're happy with it, but again, it's sad at the same time because this could have been prevented. Austin made this choice.
And finally, our last entry stood apart, showing no emotion at all, described as silent and stone-faced as judgment was handed down. Pedro Espinoza. On March 2, 2008, tragedy struck Arlington Heights, Los Angeles, when 17-year-old Jamiel Shaw II, an honor student and rising football star at Los Angeles High School, was gunned down just steps from his home. The killer was Pedro Espinoza, a 19-year-old undocumented immigrant and member of the notorious 18th Street Gang, who had been released from jail only the day before after serving time for gun charges and assaulting a police officer. Espinoza spotted Shaw carrying a red Spider-Man backpack, a color tied to the Bloods gang, and fatally misidentified him as a rival. According to trial testimony, Espinoza confronted Shaw with the gang challenge, "Where you from?" When Shaw hesitated to answer, Espinoza shot him in the abdomen. As Shaw collapsed, Espinoza coldly delivered a second shot to the head, executing the defenseless teen. Prosecutors later revealed he bragged about the killing, treating it as a way to elevate his reputation within the gang. Shaw had no gang ties whatsoever, only dreams of playing college football with recruiters from Stanford and Rutgers already eyeing his future. Justice came years later. On May 23, 2012, a jury recommended the death penalty for Espinoza, and on November 2, Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Ronald H. Rose upheld the sentence.
While the defendant was an active participant in a criminal street gang and the murder was carried out to further the activities of that criminal street gang, the defendant, Pedro Espinoza, shall be put to death within the walls of the California State Prison at San Quentin in the manner prescribed.
Rejecting defense claims that Espinoza's trial was flawed, ranging from supposed attorney incompetence to a juror wearing red, the judge declared the evidence overwhelming, citing Espinoza's cold-blooded execution and complete absence of remorse. Even in the face of a death sentence, Espinoza's demeanor remained chilling. He remained silent and stone-faced, showing little reaction during sentencing.